Hi, everyone. We're happy to welcome you to a new episode of Ask ProtoPie, our live series focused on helping you achieve success in ProtoPie faster and overcome any roadblocks you might encounter on the way. Today, we're going to dive into variables, which is one of our greatest features, allowing you to create amazingly dynamic animations without using any code at all. Let me quickly introduce myself. I'm Patricia from Italy, Customer Success Manager at ProtoPie, and I'm joined today by Abhas Sinha from India. Abhas is a prototyper at ProtoPie and also a designer at Microsoft, and it makes fantastic prototypes for our marketing campaigns, skillfully mastering our most advanced features. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what is going to show us today. As in the previous episodes, we'll have a Q&A session, and we'll answer your questions live after introducing the topic and demonstrating how you can play around with variables to create a variety of dynamic interactions. Okay, so yeah, let's go ahead and get into it. I'll pass it over to you, Abhas. I'll let you share your screen.
Awesome. Thank you, Patricia. I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. And awesome. Are you guys able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. Awesome. Okay, great. All right. So I think let me just quickly touch upon today's agenda. So we'll start off with what are variables in ProtoPie. We'll talk about a unique functionality that ProtoPie offers within variables, which is predefined variables. We'll talk about how variables and components can interact. I'll do a bunch of live demos, and then we'll have like about half an hour, 20 minutes in the end for Q&A and answer your questions. And then I think Patricia will talk about what's next. So to start off, like what are variables in ProtoPie? And I think the right way to answer this is to ask what are variables in general. So variables are just places where you can store things and reuse them later. So think of them as baskets where you can store a particular value and then use it wherever you want, whenever you want later on. This is a unique functionality that I have not particularly seen in other prototyping tools. ProtoPie has this, and this is why ProtoPie is super advanced in my eyes. So I've been playing around with a bunch of prototyping tools. And the way inside of ProtoPie that you would work with these is you would use the assign response to assign a value to variables, and then you can detect any changes to variables by using the detect trigger. So I'll talk about all of these in more detail. I'm just touching upon an initial amount of theory, more interested in the practical application of it. So I'll definitely touch upon everything. And like I mentioned, so the way that you would detect changes to any variable is by using the detect trigger. And the way that you would assign any kind of value to a variable is by using the assigned response. There is a way to directly assign a value to a variable as well, and I'll talk about that as well when I'm doing the demo. But these are the key two functions that you'll end up using a lot with variables. I would also say that variables work really well with other features inside of ProtoPie, and one of those is formulas. So again, formulas is this really advanced thing that ProtoPie has to offer. You can do all sorts of arithmetic and text and all of these. Like it's a vast, like kind of sea of operations that you can do. So you can use variables with these formulas. For example, like maybe you can use a formula to calculate an amount or something, and then you can store that value inside of a variable. Or you can put a formula directly inside of a variable and get dynamic updates as well. So I'll talk about these as well. And what can you do with variables? So I'm going to quickly touch upon what we're going to build today. And let me just share this. So today we'll learn how to, you might have seen this kind of ripple effect whenever you're tapping somewhere on the screen. Wherever you're tapping, you can make this animation appear. Like this circle will kind of ripple out and then fade out. And then you might have also seen this kind of shy chrome effect, where when you're scrolling on a list, when you're going downwards, like when you're scrolling upwards, the top chrome kind of goes away, but when you scroll downwards, it comes back. So this is also possible through variables. And we'll do more advanced application where we'll learn how to, let's say, write our name here. And then this name will start emerging inside of other places in the app. Like it'll start saying your name here, like hey there, whatever name we put here. And we'll also look at how we can manipulate this shopping cart, see the right amount here, see the right total amount here, and then the total amount of things that will also that are added in the cart will also start emerging here. So instead of 2, it'll show you the accurate amount. And finally, when we have some more time left over, I'll talk about what you can do with variables and components. So by using variables and components, you might have seen ProtoPie shared some time ago this game kind of thing that I made inside of ProtoPie. So you can see that you can move this marble wherever you tap, whatever tile you're tapping on. And this is also possible through like a very complex application of formulas and variables, but I will touch upon the building blocks of this. So maybe you can try this as well. All right. So with that, I'll go back to the presentation. And yeah, so like I said, variables themselves are very unique to the prototyping world, and ProtoPie has those. And within variables also, there's this unique thing that ProtoPie offers, which is predefined variables. So what that means is there are these set of variables that are accessible anywhere inside of the app or your ProtoPie, inside of your prototype. And some of these like will dynamically always store the latest value. So for example, you can keep tracking whatever your mouse's X or Y position is, or wherever you're touching on the screen, dynamically it will keep updating every time you this predefined variable receives an update. And we will use this in our demos as well. So finally, after like I'm done with the demos, I think the last 30 or 20 minutes we'll use just for Q&A. And with that, I think I'll just start doing the demo. All right, so I'll jump into the ProtoPie files, and please feel free to drop your questions in the chat. In the meanwhile, I do think that there are, I think I'm getting a little bar here that I want to get rid of. How to get rid of this? Oh, there you go. Awesome. So let's start by like the very foundational building blocks. So let's say you have just a singular screen with just a circle on it. That's all this has. Let me close this one, the components panel, to make you see how empty this file is. So there's nothing here. It's just one layer called rectangle1 and no interactions yet. And what we want to do is we want to tap anywhere on the screen, and we want to make this circle go there and then also scale and the opacity responses. So the way that we'll do this is first we need to start off by creating a tappable surface. So you can't just tap nothing. So we'll create a new rectangle by tapping the R button and just clicking. Alternatively, you could have gone into the shape tool and just chosen a rectangle. So once you have a rectangle, I'm just going to make sure it covers the entire screen. And then once it's covering the entire screen, I'm going to turn the fill to 0 so that it's still tappable, but you don't see it. And then now I'm going to add a tap response. So what I'll do is I'll just press the tap trigger here. And then by default, because I had this rectangle selected, it's automatically plugged in. And what I want is as soon as I tap, this circle should directly go there. So what I'll do is I'll add a move response. What do we want to move? We want to move this circle. Let me just rename this to circle so that it's easier to recall. All right. So we want to move circle wherever we're tapping. Now, the way to do that is you can directly in the X and Y values, put in this predefined variable. So I'm going to press the function bar button here so that I can put the formula here. And I'm just going to write the dollar symbol here. So when you type the dollar symbol, you can see all of the predefined variables inside of ProtoPie. And there's about 13 of these. And you should definitely play around with all of them. For now, what we're going to do is we're going to look at touch X. So this is going to be the X value of wherever you're touching. And I'm just going to say, okay. And then for the Y position, I'm going to say $sign again. And then I'm just going to write touch Y. That's it. And then just through these two predefined variables, now wherever I tap, the circle is going to start moving. Now you'll notice that I'm tapping like here, but the circle is kind of towards the bottom right corner, right? And that's because this circle's origin is off center. So it's set to the top left corner. So I'm going to make it center. And now you will notice that wherever I tap, the circle starts moving. Now, the next thing I want to do here is just a few more responses. Like the job of variables is pretty much done here, but you can enhance this experience by, let's say, adding a scale. So you can scale to, let's say, 400 by 400. And then wherever you tap, it moves and it scales at the same time. So we're going to do this instant movement. I'm going to change the duration for the move to 0. And then we're going to see that wherever we tap, the scaled circle is going. Now, what do we want? We want this guy to also minimize once more. So I'm going to duplicate the scale response. I'm going to scale it down to 100 again, which is what its original thing was. And I will change this to start right after the first scaling is done. And then I will change the duration also to 0. So now every time I tap it, it will scale up and then it will also scale down. So you can see it's pretty much already heading there, right? And then I can just go ahead and add an opacity response here. And I'll change the opacity to go to, let's say, 50 or 60. And then I'll duplicate it. And then it has to go back to 0. So I'm gonna change this guy's duration to, let's say, and then in the last 0.05 seconds, it's gonna go back to its 0 opacity, and then it will start at right when this one ends. So you can see that you're already able to very quickly build this ripple kind of effect. And you might have noticed this in a lot of Android button designs as well. Like what they do is inside of a button, wherever you tap, there's like a little ripple effect that comes out. And this is the exact same way to build that. I'm just going to pause for a brief moment here to make sure everybody's following along and nobody's having any trouble following along. Is everybody okay? I'm going to take that as a yes.
Yes.
See. Okay, seems all right, I guess. I'm going to go ahead and show you the second example, which is the shy Chrome example. So there's like a list of items, and then when you scroll downwards, this guy should reappear. But when you scroll upwards, like think about when you're using your web browser. When you use the web browser, the web canvas needs to be front and center, and you don't need to see any of the extraneous details about the UI. You're very invested in whatever you're reading or consuming on the web. So you want every other UI control to go away. To do that, we'll start off by making this list first scrollable. So I'm just going to look at the list component, the list container here, which is called frame 6. And all I have to do is I'm just going to toggle scrolling by tapping here. So by default, it's set to vertical scroll. And I can see that it starts to move, but it kind of goes back to its original spot. And the reason is the entire container is the same size as all of the elements inside it. So we need to make the container smaller. So I'm just going to go ahead and change it to all the visible area on the screen. So now the elements inside the container are bigger or lengthier than the actual length of the container. And for this reason, scrolling will now work. So let's see. So now you can see the scrolling is starting to work. All right. So I'm just going to move this under this top area, and I'm going to group both of these layers. So this is just a rectangular layer, and this is just a text layer. I'm going to combine these into one, and I'm going to call it the top nav. The reason I'm combining it is because I want to move the entire element away when I'm scrolling. So now what do we want? We want when you're scrolling in a particular direction, this guy should go away, but when you're scrolling in the other direction, it should come back. So we're going to check. We're going to first start by creating a variable that will hold the direction of the scroll. And what we'll do is we'll click on this little variable area here. We'll press the plus button, and we'll create a variable for this particular screen. And I'll tell you why this particular screen only. So quick note is whenever you're creating a variable, you get to make it for either all of your scenes inside of your prototype. Like if you have like, let's say 10 different scenes, you can use one particular variable that will store a value through those 10 scenes. Or you can just create one that will work for only that particular scene. The reason you would want to ever choose this particular scene is because you can auto assign a formula. And I'll touch upon that as well. So we've created our first variable. It's called variable 1. Let's just call this touch direction. And you can see that on the right in the properties panel, you can choose whether it's a number type of a variable, or if it's a text variable, or if it's a color. So the number will just store a numerical value, and then you can do all sorts of arithmetic operations through it. It will pass the value as if it's an actual number. If you chose text, that would make it a text string, and then it would be, you can manipulate it as if as you would manipulate any text string. And for color, it just passes on the hex value. For our case right now, we want to choose number. But the reason, like I said earlier, why we're choosing a variable only for this particular scene is because when you make a variable for this scene, it gives you an advantage, and that is that you can directly use a formula in that variable. And for this one, what we want to do is we'll make the formula whatever your touch velocity is. So I'm going to start by writing the $ again. Okay, I'm going to expand the formula bar first, and then I'm going to do it. So now you can see the predefined variables again, and you can see the touch velocity predefined variable. So what is touch velocity? Velocity is speed and direction in one. So speed is just how quickly you're scrolling from or touching from one point to the other. And then velocity will give you the direction of that touch. Is it going upwards or downwards or left or right? So if I were to choose touch velocity Y, it just will tell me along the Y-axis, is it going up or down? And I'm just going to say, okay. So now I should be able to know whatever direction my touch is moving in. What I'll also do is I will use this little debug icon. So if you tap this debug icon, you get to see the value of your variable in real time. You can see on the screen whatever value is going inside this variable. I'm going to drag this to the center so it's visible and not hidden by the notch. So you can see in our preview window that touch direction, the variable that we created, is currently at 0. But if I start scrolling upwards, it's a negative value. But if I start scrolling downwards, it's a positive value. So what we're saying is, if you have a negative value, hide this guy. But if you have a positive value, then you want to show this guy again. So we'll go ahead and add a detect trigger. So detect, like I mentioned earlier, is like a pair of eyes just watching whatever you tell it to watch. And think about, like we just want to watch particularly the scroll for this right now. So what we'll do is we'll start detecting the scroll for frame 6. So whenever a scroll happens, this trigger will start to come into play. Like it'll come into effect whenever there's a scrolling action here. And I've chosen frame 6, which is our scrollable window, but we don't want to detect the X value. We want to detect its scroll value, because that's the value that's going to change. Like the X value is static, right? So when we choose scroll, now every time there's a scroll change, like a change in the value of the scroll for this particular list, this detect trigger is going to come into effect. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a response. This response is going to move this top nav area. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change, choose the move response. And what I want to move is the top nav container. And what I want to do is I want to move top nav to like out of bounds. I want to move it like here. And at here, the position is Y equal to -100. So I'm going to move this to Y equals -100 and press enter. And it will move as soon as there's a change in the scroll. Now, the thing is, it should only work in one direction. It should come back as well, right? So what I'll do is I'll add a condition. So conditions are just a check. It just checks if whatever you're checking for, if it's true, then those responses come into effect. So in our case, what we're saying is touch direction needs to be greater than or equal, or greater than 0, right? Like, so it has to be positive. And then this guy should move away. So I'm just going to drag the move response here under this condition. So what we're saying is the moment touch direction is greater than 0, move this guy. And this should only happen if this list is being scrolled. I think I've done the reverse transition here. So it should move outside of the screen when I'm scrolling up, not down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to this condition and I'm going to change it to less than 0. So that means the moment touch direction is negative and a scroll is also happening, move this up. So as you can see, it's going up, but it's not coming back down. And the way to make it happen, like the way to make it come down again very easily is I'm just going to select this condition and I'm just going to press Control D or Command D, which is going to duplicate the entire set of interactions within that condition. And the only change I need to make right now is I want to change the condition to greater than 0, which means the touch direction is positive. And I want to move it back to its original value, which is, you can see here, it's 0. So now if I scroll up, it goes away. But if I scroll down, it comes back down. Now you'll also notice like the way that it goes away is not very smooth. And that's because of the easing that's applied to this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select both of these move responses. And for easing, I'm just going to choose, let's see, ease out. So this is the motion curve, which is going to choose how the motion actually happens. Like, is it going to be fast at the start and then slow at the end? Or is it going to be slow at the start and then fast at the end? For our case, I think ease out should work. And let's just take a look. So yeah, it is pretty much matching the velocity with which I'm scrolling. So that's a very quick way that you can add a Shy-Chrome effect to any of your prototypes. All right, I'm going to hide this guy by pressing the debug icon. And there you go. I'm just going to pause for like 1 more minute here and just check in if everybody's able to follow along easily and there's no issues. All good. Yeah. All right. I cannot see the chat while I'm presenting, so that's why I'm just checking in. All right. Okay, so this is like great. You guys have already mastered the art of using predefined variables first, just by plugging the values in directly, which is how cool is that? And secondly, by using an actual variable and then plugging predefined values into that. Now we're going to go on to a little bit like more advanced use cases. So this second prototype is kind of like, think of it as a shopping cart experience where you can purchase, let's say, pies. And the idea with this is, let me show you. Okay, let me show you what is already programmed. Like you can see a couple of interactions here, and you can see a couple of interactions here as well. So this prototype has 3 scenes. One is your profile page, and this is the jump transition that I've programmed here. Like this is a jump response, and you can press back, and again, there's a jump response. And you can go to the cart, and that's also a jump response. And those are the only interactions I've pre-programmed, so we can get like a head start and start thinking about variables. Now, the first thing that we want to do is we want to go to our profile and we want to enter our name. And whatever name we enter here, once we press save and we come back to our homepage, we want to see that same name here. Like we want to see, hey there, whatever name I enter. So the way to do that is let's go back to our profile page. And the way to start is to first add a text input layer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to text here on the top, and I'm going to add an input layer. I'm just going to click here, and now that adds an input layer. And then I'm just going to plonk it, say, that seems about good. I'm just going to make it absolutely perfect. Okay, there you go. So now we've added a text input layer. Let's quickly edit our input layer so that it perfectly matches the UI. So first thing is we don't want a background. So I'm going to scroll down here on the properties pane, and I don't want a background color here. So I'm just going to take that away. Oh, I'm just going to take the fill for the background color away. So 0. And in the placeholder area, like placeholder is basically what is the value that's shown to people when they haven't typed anything out. Oh, my mistake. I think I've been reducing the fill value for the actual placeholder and not the background. And the difference is placeholder affects the color of the text here, and fill will affect the background. So I don't need a fill here. And I'm going to change the text placeholder to just show name. And because now we already have a name field, I'm going to get rid of this name field. I'm just going to hide this. This basically came from when I was importing it from Figma. And this input layer, I just want to align it as perfectly as possible to the original UI. So the original font size was 17, and I'm just going to change that to 17. So now it matches the original UI. It matches the system default font. And now we'll just quickly see what we've done so far. We'll see what happens when we tap. So now we've created an input layer. This input layer by itself can accept a bunch of text. And if you can press enter, it will stay there. But this text value needs to be stored somewhere so that you can use it in other places. And where would you store things? It's variables. Yes, that's the right answer. All right. So I'm going to rename this input layer to, let's say, name input, just so that it's easier to access later on. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new variable that's going to hold this name. And I'm going to press the plus button. I'm going to say for all scenes. So now this is important. This has to be for all scenes because I have 3 scenes in this prototype. And I want this to work across all 3 of those. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to change it to your name. That's the name of the variable for us. And that's pretty much it. Like now we want to plug in whatever we type into this variable. So how are we going to do that? We're going to use detect and assign, as we previously spoke about. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select this name input layer. I'm going to say add trigger, and I'm going to add the detect one. So what's happening is we want to check for any changes inside of this name layer, if there's any textual changes. So right now it's checking for changes on the X value, which is not changing, but we want to check for changes to the text value. So we're going to choose text. So if there's any changes to the name input layer and the kind of change is a text kind of change, then this detect trigger is going to come into effect. Now, the first thing that we want to do is we want to update our variable with whatever is being typed. So I'm going to press the plus for a response, and I'm going to add assign. So remember, we spoke about how you can assign a value to a variable by using the assign response. So this is what we're doing. The variable that we want to assign it to is your name. And the formula is just going to be, I'm going to go into the formula bar, and I'm going to say plus, and I'm going to say name input. So what am I doing? I'm just pressing the plus bar, and I'm able to see all the layers here. And what I'm trying to do is I'm going to press plus, press name input, and then I'm going to press dot. So when you press dot right after a layer, this is basically the kind of property that you can choose inside of a layer. So what property do we want to pull out of that layer? We want to pull the text property. So whatever text is being entered inside of name input, that text property is being pulled out and it's being assigned to the variable your name. Okay, so let's see what we did. I'm just going to enable the debug here so that we can see our updated thing here. Just going to bring it out here. And I'm going to say, oh, it's not working. So why is that? Is that because I didn't change your name to a text value? So I'm going to say text. Let's see. All right, now it's working. So whatever I type here is immediately going in to the your name variable because of the detect trigger and the assign response. Now what we want to do is, so the thing is stored, great. Now we want to bring it here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to home, and we want this text to be updated every time this prototype starts. So I'm going to add a start trigger. So start comes into effect, like I mentioned, every time this prototype starts. I'm going to say restart every time. That will basically make sure that every single time the scene is arrived at, it will definitely update whatever values are here. And as soon as the thing starts, I want to update this text value. Now, whenever you import files from, let's say, Figma or Sketch, what's going to happen is this text layer by itself is not editable. It's just imported from Figma, right? So you need to select that text layer and you need to click on make editable. What this does is now this text is natively editable inside of ProtoPie. So like literally I can type whatever I want here and ProtoPie will render it for me. Okay, so now that this is editable and now that we have a start trigger, as soon as the scene starts, what we want to do is we want to change the text value for this. This text value can be changed by using the text response. So we want to change this text value and we want to change it to a dynamic value. So it has to have whatever thing we're inputting. It cannot just be a static text value. So if you choose text, you can just give it like a static value every single time. But if you choose formula, you can now use a different kind of value, like whatever value is inside of a variable, you can start using that. So what we want is, we want to see our name start appearing here. So I'm going to choose the plus button so you can see everything that's available. I'm going to choose the your name variable. So, okay. So now there's nothing here because your name is empty. If I go to my profile page, and if I write Abhas, and if I press enter, and if I press save, it just says Abhas. We also want the hey there. We want to be inviting. So what we're going to do in our formula field is just click the formula bar and open up double quotes, just write hey there, or whatever text you'd like to add. And then let's say a comma, and then a space, and then close it. Close the double quotes, press a plus. So what this is doing is it's concatenating both of these strings. Like, so whatever, this is the static part of the text, and this is the variable part of the text. So let's see what this does. So if I go here, if I write my name here, and if I press enter, and then if I press save, you can see it's saying here that Abhas. So we wanted to also come down. So I'm going to use a \n, which is basically a line break character. So it will be like right after here there ends, it just brings it down to a new line. And let's see what this does. So I'm going to go back again to the profile page, type my name again, press enter, press save. And now you can see it's saying hey there Abhas. I'm going to make it a bit more inviting, and I'm going to add another little static string, and it's just going to be an exclamation mark. All right, so now if I go to this one, and then if I type my name, and then if I save it, there you go. So now we used our name, and we input dynamic value in a different scene altogether. Like even if you want to change it right now, let's say you want to change it to, let's say, Marty McFly. Let's start doing that. And then if you press enter and then save, it's going to take that dynamic value. So that's super cool to me, like when you're making a prototype. I'm going to get rid of this debug thing just by pressing the debug icon. And then now your pie is all cleaned up. Now for the second part of it, we're going to go into the cart page. And we want to have this dynamically calculated value for whatever amount of pies we choose. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into the cart page. And let's look at these two. Right? And then this text layer, and then this text layer, and this text layer. Those are all the ones that are going to get modified. So let's start by adding the first interaction. What we want is, we want to store the number of pies. So I'm going to say new variable for all scenes once again. And the reason I'm choosing all is because we want the total amount to show up here as well. So it has to be compatible outside of this scene as well. So we made a new variable called variable1. I'm going to call it, let's say, apple pie, because that's the only one we're going to manipulate for right now. And I'm going to get rid of this window for a moment. Yeah, so that it's easier to follow. Oh, I'm sorry, is someone saying something? Okay, no. All right. So apple pie. All right, we have a new variable. It's called apple pie. I'm going to debug it already. I'm going to bring it up front so we can see. And what we want is apple pie at the start, you can see is already 1. So I'm going to give it a preset value of 1 instead of 0. So now apple pie is already 1. And what we want is, when you press the plus button, apple pie should increase by 1. So I'm going to select this add group here, and I will add a new trigger. It will be tap. So the moment I tap the plus button, what do I want? I want to increase the value of this. And the way we increase or assign a value to a variable is by using the assign response. So I'm going to choose the assign response. And then the variable that I want to impact is apple pie. So whatever apple pie is already, we want to just increase it by 1. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go expand the formula bar, press plus, choose apple pie. So this is the pre-existing value for apple pie, and whatever it is, add 1 to it. That's all. So if I press the plus button, you can see that the value for apple pie is increasing. And we also want it to decrease when you tap the minus button. So I'm just going to go ahead, select the minus group here, and then I'm going to add tap. And then when you tap minus, again, we're going to assign the same to apple pie. All we're going to do now is whatever value apple pie is at, just subtract it by 1. That's it. So now if I press this, it should also be subtracted. Now, the issue with this is it can go into negative values, and we don't want that to happen. So I'm just going to quickly add another condition, and I will say that this should only work as long as apple pie is greater than 0. So when it reaches 0, don't subtract anymore. So the condition is going to be apple pie has to be greater than 0. And, or let's say greater than 0. And then only then it will work. So I'm going to move this assign response under it. So what we're saying is when you tap minus, and if this condition is met, which is apple pie is greater than 0, then subtract it by 1. But if it's not greater than 0, then don't. So what this does is you can see that it will not go below 0. All right. So now we've got the variable we've got the value in our variable. And now what we want to do is we want to update the price for each, and we want to update the text value for based on whatever amount is being set in the variable. So the way to do that is going to be very similar to what we just did. We're going to select this text layer. First, make it editable, because by default, when you import from Figma, it's not editable. So now that it's editable, what we're saying is every time this variable changes, we want to update this. So the way to check for that is you put a pair of eyes and you check the variable. So detect anytime this variable apple pie changes, you need to update this text layer. So update text. So the text response will update all text values. And what we want to do is we want to update this one. So update this text layer, and we want to use a formula, not a static text value. So we're going to use a formula, and we're going to put apple pie. So whatever value apple pie has, it should just start showing up here. Great. So that's already working. Now what we want is we want this amount to also be updated and this amount to also be updated. So we're going to follow the same process. We're going to select this text layer, make it editable, and we're going to select this text layer and also make it editable. And in the detect one, so whenever apple pie is changing, we want to update this text value and this text value. So we're going to go ahead and select text once again as a response. For the first one, we want to update 599, and we're going to choose a formula once again. And what we're going to write is we're going to expand the formula bar. We're going to write apple pie and then multiply that with 599. So 599. And now every time you update, the total amount gets updated. We also want this one to be updated. So we're going to use another text response. This time we want to update the lower value here, 899. And then again, we're going to choose formula because we want a dynamic value. I'm going to expand the formula bar here. Apple pie times 599. And then add one of these starry pie ones. So I'm going to add like plus 899. So however many apple pies you want, plus a starry pie. And then what this does is the total amount and the apple pie amount gets updated. Now we want to do one more thing, and that is when you go back here, this amount should also be updated. So we're going to go back to the home page, and we're going to select this text layer. Again, make it editable so that ProtoPie can dynamically edit it. And then what we're saying is every time apple pie changes, so because this is a new scene, we're not going to detect changes for this variable because all the changes for this variable are happening in that scene. Instead, we want it to update every time the scene loads. So you remember how last time when we wanted to add our name here, we used the start trigger to say that every time the scene loads, update this text value. And we're going to use the same start trigger to update this text value as well. So I'm going to go ahead and add one more text response. And I will select this one, which is what we just made editable. And again, it has to be a formula, not a static value. And I'm going to choose the formula bar. And I am going to add apple pie. So that's the number of apple pies you have, plus one starry pie, right? So that's fixed for now. We can repeat the same process for starry pie as well and make it completely dynamic. But for now, I think the example is enough. So apple pie plus 1 will give you the total amount of items in the cart. I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of the debug icon here. And let's just take a look once again. So for the entire flow, I'm going to go to the profile page. I'm going to enter my name. I'm going to press save. So now you can see it says my name. I'm going to go to the cart. I'm going to add like 5 apple pies. And then I'm going to go back. And then now you can see that this value is also updated. Now I think we are at about 20 more minutes left, and I would love to open this for Q&A. There is a bit more complexity we can achieve when you're working with components. And the idea here was like basically whatever tile I'm tapping, you can go there, whatever the tile is. And that was basically the fundamental of how I made the Marble World game, which is basically what I'm doing is all of these are tiles that I can just tap, and that's the same thing. So I'll touch upon components at the end if we still have time, but for now, I would love to open it for Q&A. Let's do that. All right, yeah, please, we'd love to hear from you guys.
Thank you so much, Abhas, for this amazing demos. Okay, I see we already have some questions in the Q&A window. Okay, we're gonna start with the first one. So Muscat has asked, how to create long press interactions to drag an object without releasing the finger. The problem is when the long press object is in a scroll container. So if you make it draggable, it won't let you scroll over the object.
So you want to use a long press draggable object inside of a scrollable container, is that right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, that is a bit complex. What I would usually do for that kind of scenario is, so like, for example, let's say you want to make this one draggable, right? That's the idea. Let's see what would happen. I'm going to start by, let's say, add a long press. And then we're saying drag or like move. So what do we use? Maybe we can use move. I'm not sure. Okay. Let's see. So that's weird because drag itself is a trigger, right? You can't. Oh, okay. So there is a way to do this. It requires. Okay, I see what you mean. I think it's a little bit complex. So what you would need to do is, I think I would create like a fake timer that just comes into effect. And I'm just going to try this. All right, I'm just trying this, and if it doesn't work, don't hate me. But okay. So let's say I'm going to create a fake timer, and what happens is, as soon as the scene starts, I'm going to say the timer should assign. All right, assign to timer whatever timer is +1, and repeat it like infinitely, and then maybe every 0.1 seconds. So let's debug the timer one here. And so I'm just going to rename this so that we remember. I'm going to make this LP so that long press. So you can see the timer one is getting updated. And what we'll do is, instead of using the long press one, we'll just add a drag. And what we'll do is, the moment you start dragging, okay, so we want this to happen the moment you start dragging. Okay, you can't assign on drag also. Yeah, I think this is a bit complex. I will have to get back to you on this. Like this will require some more thinking, and maybe at the end, if there's still time, I would love to experiment with this. But why don't we come back to this one at the end? How about I would do that? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, let's go to the next one. How to create a detect trigger to track tapped coordinate within a scrollable container. I have tried predefined variables of touch X and Y, but it's only for screen coordinates. So how do I track coordinates tap within the scrollable container?
Ah, I see. That is also okay. So within the scrollable window, lots of complexity. All right, let me try this. There is a way to do this actually. Let me try this. So for example, let's say I'm gonna select the moment you're inside of this layer. I'm gonna add, let's say, the moment you do a touchdown on this entire frame. So let's say touchdown, and then inside of this entire frame, and then I'm gonna say assign, and then I'm going to add it to, let's say, a new value, just we can get the value. So this is just a check. And what I'm going to do is inside of variable one, there is a screen layer. I do believe there is a way to check for values inside, like I think it's on screen. What is that one called? Hold on. I'd used it in the Marble world as well. I'm just gonna check here. Hmm. All right, yeah, I think it's this one. 2 layer. All right, let me try this one out. Let me try this one out. Okay. So what we're saying is we want, can you repeat the question? So we're saying you want to detect within the scroll container where it's being touched, right? Yes. So if I were to assign 2 layer, and let's say predefined variable touch, let's say X. So what this does, I believe, what? Why would this not work? Oh, 2 layer X, all right. So let's, what we do is here, $sign touch X. Okay. What? Okay, so we're going to give it our layer, which is frame 6. And give it the Y value as well. Yeah, these are pretty complex ones, but okay, it's worth a try. So now what we're saying is, within the scroll container, okay, let's choose Y because that's the one that's going to get affected. So let's go back to this one. When every time you touch down, let's say Y. So as you can see, now wherever you're touching inside of the scrollable layer, you're getting the Y value for it. Like there's this function called 2 layer X and 2 layer Y that you can use. Definitely would suggest, like these are one of these really advanced functions that you should check out on the ProtoPie page on what the actual syntax is. But what we're doing is we're choosing the 2 layer Y and we're choosing out what layer. So for our case, it's frame 6. And then you're giving it the argument of touch X and touch Y. So where is touch X and touch Y on frame 6? If I'm not mistaken, I think this is what it is. Because if you look at this one, right, 1189 is beyond what the screen size is. Screen size is around 812. But because we've gone down in the scroll window, you can actually figure out now the Y value of wherever you're tapping, as you can see. I hope this answered your question. This was pretty complex, but thank you for bringing this up.
Thank you, Abhas. Okay, let's go move to the next one. When you assign a formula such as touch velocity, variables, just touch velocity, does the number under variable matter? For example, having 2 instead of 1, what difference does it make?
I see. So you're saying touch velocity, right? Like, so for example, in our case, like the variable touch direction was just directly being assigned the value touch velocity y. And if I understand your question correctly, you're saying instead of writing greater than 0, what would happen if I wrote greater than 1? Is that right? So why are we writing greater than 0? Greater than 0 just means it is a positive number, and less than 0 just means that it is a negative number. If you change it to something else, like 1 is very close to 0. So if it's greater than 1 or if it's greater than 0, it's pretty much the same thing. Like I think there's going to be a very low kind of circumstance where it's greater than 0 but not greater than 1. But think of it as, let's say you do greater than 100, right? So that would mean if you're scrolling like this, it won't work. But if you scroll fast, then it will. So that's the idea. Velocity is your speed with the direction. So if you choose like a larger value, what would happen is you'd have to give like a larger speed of movement, and then it would work, but otherwise it will not. Think about, let's say, see, I'm right now under 100, but if I go up beyond 100, it'll work. So that's the whole point. Like if you give it a different value than 0, it will just increase the speed threshold for it. Like you would have to move faster for this to come into effect. That's all.
Thank you. Perfect. Okay, Mark asked, is there a way to change a previously made variable for from this scene to old scene or vice versa if we later decide we needed a variable elsewhere? So to change a variable for this scene into a variable for all scenes later on. Would that be?
Are you saying, can you repeat the question? So you're saying, can I change a variable for all scenes?
That's, yeah, Mark asked if it's possible to change a variable for this scene into a variable for all scenes.
Oh, can you change it? Oh yeah, oh no, you cannot. No. You have to make that call when you make a new variable. Like if you've made it, like for example, like this one that I've made, you cannot now change its property to be applicable for all scenes. You have to make that call at the start.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Vincent asked, is it possible to have another Pi example on how the calculation and stepper works when the item is a component? I don't know if we have time to demonstrate. Maybe we can do it very quickly.
Yeah, so are you saying if it were a component, how would it work? Is that the idea?
Exactly.
Yeah, so you would have to use variables with components, and see, components cannot communicate with your scene directly, and you have to use the send and receive trigger and response. So the way you do it is, let me very quickly highlight using the example that I had, right? So what you would need to do is, for example, like all of these are components. There are 3 tile components, and each of these components has like a predefined interaction to it. Like when I hover over it, it kind of does this thing. Now, if you look inside this component, what's happening is whenever you send, you have to send a response. So what I'm doing is I'm sending a tile tap message. This message is plain text. It could be whatever it is, but whatever this response, whatever you're sending, whatever message you're sending in the current scene, it should match the receive trigger as well. And what you can send it with a value. Now, this could be a numerical value, right? You could just send it a 1, or you could send it a variable. So in our case, I made like a variable called ID. It's just 0. And what I'm doing it is I'm sending directly an ID variable here. So I think that is the way to do it. I'm just very quickly touching upon this. But yeah, just to kind of pick up one more question before I go. But I hope this will give you an answer. And this is the way, like you need to use the send and receive trigger and response and trigger for this to make it work. And all you have to do is go to the main component, and when you're using your send it with a value, and when you're receiving it, so think about like the receive, whatever you're receiving, you can assign that to a variable. So if you're receiving like a -1, you can assign it to a -1 or anything. You can just, every time you get a 1, just subtract 1. You can do that as well.
Thank you so much.
I hope that works. Like I'm just doing like a very quick thing, but yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. Yeah, we're just going to answer one last question before wrapping up. So I have multiple buttons, and I gave a tap trigger to each of those buttons to change color after tapping. Is there any way to do with variables to create those tapping colors?
So every button you tap changes into a different color. Is that the idea?
Yeah, I mean, this is what I
Okay.
understand.
Yeah, that's a pretty easy one. Like what you would need to do is let's just say that like there are, let's say 3 squares, for example. I'm just gonna let's go back to this one. So let's say there are 3 squares, and if you were to tap this one, I mean, I don't think you need a variable for this, but what you could do is you can store hex values in variables, and then you can give it that color. But what you could do is just whenever you're tapping, just change the color property, and then the hex is just that. I think that is the way to do it, but you can create a variable that contains the color value, and then you can assign that color as well. So I think that's the way I guess I would do it. Does that help? I guess I don't know.
Amazing. Thank you. Okay, yeah, I think it's night time to wrap up the session. I will
Okay.
share my
Do you want me
screen.
to? Okay, I'll just go ahead and.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
All right.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So yeah, thank you everyone for asking such good questions. Yeah, if you have any other questions, really feel free to reach out to us through our website, live chat window, or contact us form, or ask in our user community. We'll be really happy to help. We have a Black Friday promotion going on this month. You can find the details on our website. But we also created this special coupon for this event, which can be used at checkout to get a free month on monthly pro plans. Okay, so just a quick overview of what will be coming next. We have our last webinar for 2022 going live this Thursday at 5 p.m. PST, featuring the design team at the design agency Pontcott. So it's gonna be a very interesting talk. So if you'd like to check it out, we are sharing the registration link in the chat. And our next Ask ProtoPie Live event will be hosted on December 1st at 5:30 PST, 11:30 p.m. Central European Time. Next time we'll focus on formulas with our expert, Jeffrey Clark. So yeah, you can register starting from today on the page we are sharing in the chat. And yeah, if you haven't joined our user communities yet, you can join from the link in the chat. There you can get help, check our latest news, and learn together with our fellow pie makers. So it's definitely a very useful space to be part of. Okay, so thanks everyone again for coming in today. It's been a great session, and we hope to see you again at our next live event. Bye, and have a great rest of the day. Thank you again, Abhas, for your...
Thank you, folks. I hope I answered your questions, and for the ones that I wasn't able to, I think we'll definitely get back.
We'll get back. Yeah, we'll get back to them. Don't worry. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye, everyone.